Imagine you build a lock so sophisticated that the government decides the key itself needs to be locked up. That is more or less what happened to Anthropic when its two most advanced AI models were grounded by US export controls. Not because they did something wrong, but because they were considered too capable to let out without supervision. The models in question are codenamed Fable and Mythos. For months, they sat in a kind of regulatory holding pen, available only within the US, while the government figured out whether they posed risks serious enough to require international controls. That restriction has now been lifted. Fable and Mythos are cleared for global release. But the more interesting story isn't the clearance. It's the mechanism that got them there and what it reveals about how we decide when an AI is safe enough to ship. To understand any of this, you need to understand what AI safety testing actually is, because it's nothing like testing a car for crash safety or a drug for side effects. It's closer to hiring a team of people whose entire job is to convince your product to do the worst thing it possibly can. This is called red teaming. You assemble a group of experts, biosecurity specialists, cybersecurity researchers, people who study chemical weapons proliferation, and you give them unlimited access to the model with one goal: find something catastrophic. Think of it like a bank hiring elite thieves to rob it before the robbers do. If they can get in, the vault needs a better lock. If they can't, you have evidence the system holds under pressure. Anthropic calls its version of this framework responsible scaling policy. The idea is straightforward. Before you scale a model up to the next level of capability, you have to prove the previous level didn't unlock anything dangerous. It's a checkpoint system, and critically, Anthropic published it publicly. That publication is what spooked Washington. When a frontier AI lab voluntarily tells the world that its own models might be approaching thresholds for serious harm, specifically what researchers call CBRN risks, meaning chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, governments start paying very close attention. It wasn't that Fable or Mythos had done anything harmful. It was that Anthropic's own internal benchmarks put them close enough to a capability ceiling that regulators felt the export of that intelligence to foreign labs, foreign governments, foreign actors, was a legitimate risk worth controlling. Here's the analogy that makes this click. A commercial jet and a military drone are both aircraft, but we don't export them under the same rules. The question isn't, is this thing a plane? It's, what can this thing do in the wrong hands? Same logic now applies to AI models, so what does a model have to demonstrate to get cleared? Essentially, three things: that expert red teamers couldn't extract information that meaningfully accelerates mass casualty harm, that the model has robust refusal behaviors that survive adversarial pressure, and that those behaviors hold even when users get creative. That last part is the hardest. Getting a model to refuse a direct harmful request is relatively easy. Getting it to refuse when the request is wrapped in fiction, roleplay, hypotheticals, or technical-sounding academic framing, that's the actual challenge. Imagine telling someone, "Don't tell anyone the secret." Easy. Now imagine someone asks you to write a story where a character happens to explain the secret in detail, or frames it as a history lesson, or claims they need to know it to prevent harm. The model has to see through all of those at once. Fable and Mythos passed these evaluations, which is why they're now cleared. But here's what that clearance actually means and doesn't mean. It means no red team expert could demonstrate that the model provides meaningful uplift toward mass casualty weapons. It does not mean the model is harmless in every other sense. This distinction matters enormously. Safety in the export control sense is a narrow, specific bar. A model can be globally cleared and still spread misinformation, generate convincing scams, or cause real social harm. Passing the weapons test is not a certificate of general goodness. What this story also reveals is something structurally important about who is doing the testing. Right now, the labs largely test themselves, or commission third-party evaluators they help select. It's a bit like a pharmaceutical company running its own drug trials. The incentives are not perfectly aligned. Government-led testing bodies are beginning to emerge. The UK's AI Safety Institute, the US AI Safety Institute. But they're still young, understaffed, and racing to keep up with models that improve faster than evaluation frameworks can be written. The deeper irony of the fable and mythos story is this. Anthropic's transparency is what created the regulatory friction in the first place. A less forthcoming lab might have shipped quietly without triggering any controls at all. Honesty in this case had a real commercial cost. That tension is going to define the next decade of AI development. The labs most willing to surface their own risks are the ones most likely to face regulatory consequences for doing so. That creates a perverse incentive to say less, test quietly, and ship fast. The global release of Fable and Mythos is a small but telling moment. Proof that the checkpoint system can work, but also a preview of how slow, contested, and politically fraught it's going to be to govern tools that are genuinely hard to evaluate, even for the people who built them.